All of us have dreams and hopes for our future. The story you're about to hear encompasses a series of dreams and facts that led to a life-changing future. A story explaining how relevant it is to take the phrase, follow your dreams, literally. Learning how to close your eyes and open your heart to truth. These dreams allowed Ms. Cheryl Wills to find her new inspiration, allowing her to come face to face with her roots and their struggles. Spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, she has become more open and connected to her past. It takes strength, power, and determination to experience the powerful journey that Ms. Wills endured. New York One's Cheryl Wills is an inspirational leader and influential individual. From advancing her station as a producer to an active medical reporter, to being one of New York's most dynamic female anchors, who happens to be African American. As a graduate of Syracuse University, Ms. Wills does her best to reach out to students within the tri-state area. As a member of the Screen Actors Guild, you could see her in a number of motion pictures such as Freedom Land and The Brave One. Every day you could find her on Channel 1 delivering the daily news. Ms. Wills aspires to leave the legacy of being the first in 150 years in her family to, quote, remove the iron curtain between the 19th century relatives and the 20th century relatives in her family. However, that will not only be the only legacy she leaves. The connections and relationships that she's held, the people that she's changed, everything she represents will also be remembered and recognized. At this moment, we have the honor of listening to Ms. Cheryl Wills' life story that changed her and led her to writing the book, Die Free, A Heroic Family History. Thank you.
And thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I want to thank all of you for being here. I've been to St. Francis College numerous times, and I'm always impressed by the staff, the students. I'd like to thank President Dugan for having me, Dean Houlihan, Rich Relkin, my colleague who worked at New York One for a number of years, and it's always nice to see him again. And of course, I'd like to thank Andrea Andrews. I gave her a copy of my book before I gave my own mother a book. So that should tell you what I think of her. She is a dynamic woman. I'd like to honor Madam Cooper, the widow of the distinguished Mr. Cooper. I was very inspired by Mr. Cooper's career when I was a young girl. I knew it was a tremendous task to create a newspaper. That was not something for the faint of heart. And he did it while being a leader in the civil rights movement, and I was absolutely inspired by him. And as a result of his great work, I was able to enter the field of journalism. So, you know, I never got to meet him personally, but his work still touched me. And that's the power of journalism that I'd like to tell all of you young journalists in training. It's a powerful profession where it can lead you anywhere. The avenues are endless. Now, I want you to know that I honor Andrea's father because I know what it's like to lose a father. My book, Die Free, A Heroic Family History, is about my father, but it's about 4 generations of fathers. And let me tell you a little bit about my dad. His name was Clarence Wills, and he had everything to live for. A beautiful wife, 5 young children who worshiped the ground he walked on. He had loving parents who idolized him. The New York City Fire Department, which had promoted him. The Masons, the New York Army National Guard. He was a paratrooper, very distinguished, and a part-time student at John Jay College. And he became disillusioned in life when he was in his mid-30s. And he left us all like a thief in the night. He was killed on the Williamsburg Bridge in a horrific motorcycle accident. I was 13 years old. My brother here, Clarence, is joining me. He was 12. I had a sister who was 8, and a twin sister and brother, Celeste and Cleavon, and they were 6. And to say that our lives were dramatically changed is an understatement. When you're a child, you never forget seeing your father in the front of a church, laid stiff and silent in a casket. You will never forget something like that. And I had so many questions about who was my dad? Why is my last name Wills? Why did my dad become so disillusioned, as successful as he was? Why did he just join a motorcycle club and basically throw his life away? And as I became an anchor at New York One, which was a privilege and an honor to be one of the original employees at New York One, those questions started to bother me even more. I felt like a part of my history was missing. And then a wonderful thing happened. I was literally goofing off on the internet one day, and I went to Ancestry.com, and no, they're not paying me to say that. And I plugged in my last name, Wills, and the town where I knew my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather were born, Haywood County, Tennessee. And up comes this name, Sandy. Sandy Wills. And I wondered, who the heck is that? My dad's name was Clarence. My grandpa's name was Fred. His father's name was Alan Wills, but I had never heard of a Sandy. And then I saw the acronym USCT, which means United States Colored Troops. My jaw dropped. The U.S. Colored Troops were a colored regiment during the Civil War. And I immediately, as a journalist, I knew what to do, young people. You have to get your sources right, get your facts right, okay? That's journalism 101, confirmation. And I hired a genealogist, and that professional genealogist went to the National Archives and gave me thousands of documents about a grandfather who walked away from his slave plantation in 1863, rounded up 5 of his enslaved brothers, and went to a military installation and fought for their freedom. Please allow me to read an excerpt from chapter 1. Sandy Wills was born on a slave plantation in 1840 in Tipton County, Tennessee, a farming community overrun with black slaves. The frumpy town gently kissed the Mississippi River just north of Memphis. In a community where the summers were dreadfully long and wistfully hot, Sandy entered this world in an unsanitary, dark and cramped slave shack with no windows. Bloodied and soiled sheets were crumpled beneath his exhausted and forlorn slave mother, a woman who history would quickly forget. Those in attendance at Sandy's birth probably welcomed him with a muted joy, knowing that the child had just departed the only free world he would ever know, the womb. Sandy's dark future had already been determined for him. He was born into a barbarous and brutal universe where he'd be forced to sing when he wanted to rest, laugh when he wanted to cry, and pray when he wanted to learn. No one bothered to write down the day my great-great-great-grandfather was born. Who cared? Slaves were born, and then they died. They were not expected to contribute anything memorable to the world. No one wrote down the birth dates of horses either, and like animals was exactly how slave owners viewed Africans. In a country that prided itself on literacy and record keeping, slaves were not taught to read or write because education has always meant power, and slave owners had a vested interest in keeping slaves ignorant and powerless. However, the date of Sandy's entry into the United States of America was worth being recorded because he was among the last generation of colored children born into the wicked cycle of slavery. My great-great-great-grandfather, Sandy, was 10 years old in 1850 when he was dressed and readied for a sale in a showroom as a dreaded bell tolled for his transaction. Edmund Willis Wills purchased my great-great-great-grandfather, and the young child was immediately removed from his mother, his father, the place he knew as home, never to see his family again. But he quickly bonded with his new kin, 5 boys in particular: Mac Wills, Richard Wills, James Wills, Andy Wills, and Dick Wills. They were all owned by Edmund Willis Wills, and by custom, they assumed their master's last name. My name is Cheryl Wills, ladies and gentlemen. They were not brothers by blood, but I call them brothers in bondage. And on a slave plantation, bondage was thicker than blood. By the time my great-great-great-grandfather Sandy was in his early 20s in 1863, he had somehow got word that a great war was being fought, the North versus the South. And even though he was illiterate, he was intelligent enough to know that if the North won, he was free. And if the South won, he would die a slave, just like his enslaved grandfather and the long line of men and women before him. Abolitionist Frederick Douglass was making a desperate appeal at the time to enslaved and free black men to join the cause to fight for their own freedom. Douglass wrote, "The day dawns, the morning star is bright upon the horizon." Douglass said, "The iron gate of our prison stands half open. One gallant rush from the North will fling it wide open, while 4 million of our brothers and sisters shall march on to freedom. He who would be free, let them strike the blow." Frederick Douglass said, "Better to die free than to live slaves."
Going up yonder to reign in Jerusalem, going up yonder to reign up there. Going up yonder to reign in Jerusalem, going to see my Lord. Going up yonder to reign in Jerusalem, going up yonder to reign up there. Going up yonder to reign in Jerusalem, going to see my Lord. I know my robe is going to fit me well, tried it on at the gates of hell. If you don't believe I've been redeemed, follow me down to the Jordan stream. I stepped in the water and the water was cold, chilled my body but not my soul. Jordan's river is deep and wide, I got a home on the other side. Glory, hallelujah, glory, hallelujah, glory, hallelujah, going to see my Lord. I know my robe is going to fit me well, tried it on at the gates of hell. If you don't believe I've been redeemed, follow me down to the Jordan stream. I stepped in the water and the water was cold, chilled my body but not my soul. Jordan's river is deep and wide, I got a home on the other side. Glory, hallelujah, glory, hallelujah, glory, hallelujah, going to see my Lord. Glory, hallelujah, glory, hallelujah, glory, hallelujah, going to see my Lord.
Thank you, Ensemble of Praize. You've all been given copies of the soldiers' enlistment forms. I want you to take a look at the first page with me. I'll explain it to you. These are actual copies of the original documents from the National Archives. They are the forms that were filled out after my great-great-great-grandfather Sandy and the others walked barefoot from their slave plantation to a federal installation camp, which was about 100 miles away. As you look at the documents on the first page, follow along as I interpret what you're seeing. Dick Parker, sir, he said with a mark of defiance. Dick's last name was legally Wills because he, like the others, were the property of Edmund Willis Wills. But Dick never forgot that he was named for his father, Dick Parker, and even in the pit of slavery, he had always embraced his biological father's identity. More than 30 years later, in an affidavit for his pension, Dick stated, quote, "When a slave before the war, I belonged to Willis Wills who raised me. Therefore, I was known as Dick Wills. But after the war, I took the name of my father, Dick Parker. I was named for him, though always called by the name of my old master, Wills." Lieutenant Fetterman wrote that his name was Dick Wills, unaware of the courageous act from a man whose emancipation began with the reclaiming of his namesake. It was the first warning shot from Dick that the war over slavery had already been won. As you can see on the page, the lieutenant noted that Dick was 22 years old, stood 5 feet 4.5 inches. His complexion, eyes, and hair color were deemed black. Dick went on to tell the lieutenant that he was born in Haywood County, Tennessee, and belonged to Edmund Wills. And like all of the other Wills men, he was serving a 5-year term, assuming the bloody war would last that long. To my delight, occupation was left blank. For most of the runaway slaves, they put slave for occupation. How absurd. It's not clear why Dick's occupation line was left blank. Could it be that he outright told him to leave it blank? Or perhaps the lieutenant realized in the final weeks following the war that it was absurd to certify a slave's bondage as a slave. Whatever the case, Dick Parker's occupation was left blank for the ages. "My name is Sandy Willis Wills," Lieutenant Moggy, apparently thinking the young illiterate man with a southern drawl misspoke, wrote Sandy Willis. This simple clerical error led to great frustration in the years following the Civil War. When Sandy's wife Emma applied for a widow's pension after his death, she had to hire a lawyer to cut through miles of bureaucratic red tape to confirm that her husband's last name was actually Sandy Wills. As Sandy faced his enlistment officer, he stated his age as 23 and said he was born in Tipton County in Tennessee, assumedly without even raising his head to look at my great-great-great-grandpa. The lieutenant wrote black for complexion, eyes, and hair color. And when it came to occupation, the officer wrote farmer. Farmer. My jaw dropped. Farmer? Did my grandpa actually tell this lieutenant that he was a farmer rather than a slave? If so, Sandy was more of a revolutionary than I could have ever imagined. If Sandy said farmer, then that means he did not allow the forces of slavery, mighty as they were, to define him. If he basically declared himself a free man living as a farmer, then that proves that he too had won the Civil War long before any battle had been fought. No one wrote on Sandy's enlistment form that he was owned by Edmund Wills of Haywood County like all the others. And that's probably because my great-great-great-grandpa knew that despite evidence to the contrary, he couldn't be bought. His soul was not for sale, no matter how many slave owners claimed to have a receipt for his precious life. Whether the Union won or lost the war, Sandy was convinced that he would not return to Edmund Wills's plantation as a slave. He was a farmer in his imagination, and as unlearned as he was, Sandy didn't need a textbook to teach him that his imagination was the most powerful force on earth. His mindset contained enough energy to break every shackle and pop every chain. Sandy found freedom before the Civil War ended, and he escaped the jails that ignorance had built. Now, Die Free is not only about my family in the 19th century, as you see from the many photographs here, it's also about my family in the mid-20th century. My mother, as I told you in the beginning, became a widow at the age of 38, left with 5 children. I was the oldest. My brother Clarence is here, and you know, he was diagnosed with autism when he was a toddler. Back in the 60s, we didn't know much about autism, and as a family, we had to figure it out the hard way. But he was always part of our family's drama, and there was a whole lot of drama in a household with 5 children. I nicknamed him Big Boy when he was a baby because he was a big boy. He was plump with big fat cheeks. And here's what I wrote about him in my book. Big Boy is doing just fine. His disability shielded him from the agony of our father's death. My mother says about 8 years after our dad died, he looked at my mother Ruth and said, "Daddy's dead and he's never coming back, is he, Mom?" We were shocked. He may have considered our father's passing a temporary condition. It was the first funeral any of us had ever been to, and it turns out no one had ever fully explained death to Big Boy. Undeterred, my brother graduated from Uniondale High School in 1989 with a special education diploma. Now he's an amateur cartoonist and has thousands of characters he's created like Super Stretch and Lardball. He's even won a lot of awards for his work. But we were all shocked when he became then Senator Barack Obama's biggest fan, because we didn't think he knew anything about politics. During the historic campaign, Big Boy drew Obama campaign posters and posted them all over town. I kept one that he designed, where he colored the characters green and blue with outstretched arms and wrote, "He's my kind of president. Please vote for it." I wanted to change his grammar to "Please vote for him," but you know what? It was perfect just the way he wrote it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my brother, Big Boy.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Clarence Wills. Thank you. My name is Clarence Wills, but my sweet sister Cheryl nicknamed me Big Boy when we were kids. Unfortunately, the name stuck. Nice going, sis. How would you like to be called Big Girl when you're 42 years old? Great job and grits. Anyway, I'm seriously delighted to be here at St. Francis College. I have had the honor of traveling all over town with my sweet and successful sister as we share our family's historic legacy. I'm just sorry that our dad is not here to see us now. He would be so proud. But I know he's smiling upon us from heaven. I know he's happy that despite my disability, I graduated from Uniondale High School and I have a part-time job at Baldwin McDonald's from 1991 to 2000. I am pursuing my lifelong dream to be a professional cartoonist someday soon. I have created thousands of original characters like Super Stretch and Oddball, Andre and the Pirates, Blitz the Bat, Tricky Dog, Pandy, and lots of others, like the Nottinghams. Who knows? I may be the next Charles Schultz. I believe I can do it because my great-great-great-grandfather, Sandy Wills, fought in the Civil War so I could dream my biggest dreams no matter what. So many thanks to him, I have the freedom to spread my wings and reach for the stars. Not even autism will stop me from being the best I can really be. Thank you.
Thanks, big boy. Thank you, Clarence. There are a lot of memorable people in my book, from my 85-year-old grandmother Opal, who crisscrossed the country singing gospel music and still lives in Astoria, Queens, to my mother Ruth, who stood by her 5 children and watched them grow into productive citizens. But the heart and soul of this book is Sandy's widow, Emma. Take a look at the second page that I have handed out to you. Those are her depositions, because when she filed for her widow's pension initially, she was considered a liar. So she had to hire a lawyer and explain who she was married to, the children she had, and because she filed all these depositions, what you see there is how I got so much of my family's history, by her humble depositions to a college-educated lawyer. And this is the final chapter of my book I'd like to read as you look at the deposition. My great-great-great-grandmother, whom I have crowned the Mother Mary of our family, and I do that because she filed numerous depositions to get her husband's war pension. As you see on page 2 of the leaflet, I have hundreds of pages of her personal testimony where she described in stunning detail her life from slavery to freedom. She was among the first wave of free African American wives and mothers after the Civil War. Even though she could not read or write because slaves were forbidden to do so, she saw to it that all of her children could. And while she didn't know her own birthday, she gracefully persuaded her former master's son, Joel Moore, to write down in her family Bible the day that every one of her children was born. A Bible, mind you, that she couldn't read for herself. My grandmother Emma had tremendous dignity, self-respect, and vision. She instinctively knew that her life was not in vain. And here I am, some 150 years later, to prove that she was right. Despite her illiteracy, Emma Wills hired lawyers to fight for her widow's pension, and she won. Good for her. She signed every document with an X. And when college-educated lawyers pressed her for specifics, she said, "I don't know, but I know my Bible is right. And here it is. I show it to you." You know, I would pay any amount of money to get my hands on that precious Bible, which is the holy grail for my family's legacy, just to see with my own eyes that she knew that her life and her children's lives were worth recording. There are no photographs of Emma, but I imagine she had strong arms and hands. During her short lifetime, she was about 50 when she died. She had spent the bulk of her time tending to everyone's needs but her own. The happiest day of her life was her wedding day, when she probably wore a white dress or gown and fell into the arms of a loving husband and proud veteran who helped win the war and free generations yet born. I'm so grateful to know her name and her legacy. Emma and Sandy, the original freedom fighters of our family, are the reason I am free today. Thank you.
Y'all can clap your hands. I want to ride.
Cheryl in the morning, Lord.
Oh, I want to ride. Get ready.
For the judgment day.
My Lord.
My Lord.
I want to ride.
Riding Cheryl in the morning, Lord.
Oh, I want to
Riding Cheryl in the morning,
ride.
Lord.
Get ready.
For the judgment day.
My Lord.
My Lord. Are you ready, my brother?
Oh, yes.
Are you ready, my sister?
Oh, yes.
Are you here to see Jesus?
Oh, yes. I'm ready for the chariot because I'm ready to ride.
Are you ready, my brother?
Oh, yes.
Are you ready, my sister?
Oh, yes.
Are you here to see Jesus?
Oh, yes. I'm waiting for the chariot because I'm ready to ride. I want to ride. Come on,
Ride the chariot
y'all.
in the morning, Lord.
Oh, I want to
Ride the
ride.
chariot in the morning, Lord.
Get ready.
For the judgment day.
My Lord.
My Lord.
I want to
Ride the chariot in
ride.
the morning, Lord.
Oh, I want to
Ride the chariot in the morning,
ride.
Lord.
Get
Get
ready.
ready for the judgment day.
My Lord.
My Lord. Are you ready, my brother?
Oh, yes.
Are you ready, my sister?
yes.
Are you here to see Jesus?
Oh, yes. I'm ready for the chariot because I'm ready to
Are
ride.
you ready, my brother?
Oh, yes.
Are you ready, my sister?
Oh, yes.
Are you here to see Jesus?
Oh, yes. I'm ready for the chariot
because I'm ready to ride. Ride. Waiting for the chariot because I'm ready to ride. Ride. Ready for the chariot because I'm ready to ride. Ride. Ready for the chariot because I'm ready to ride. Ride. Ready for the chariot because I'm ready to ride.
I want to ride.
Ride a chariot in the morning, Lord.
I want to
Ride a chariot in the morning,
ride.
Lord.
Get ready.
Getting ready for the judgment day.
My
My Lord,
Lord.
my Lord.
I want to ride.
Ride a chariot in the morning, Lord.
Oh, I want to
Ride a chariot in the
ride.
morning, Lord.
Getting ready.
Getting ready for the judgment day.
I'm getting ready.
Getting ready for the judgment day.
I'm getting ready.
Getting ready for the judgment
Can't wait
day.
to see my
Getting
Lord.
ready for the judgment day.
I'm getting ready.
Getting ready for the judgment day.
Ready.
Getting ready for the judgment day.
I'm getting ready.
Getting ready for the judgment day.
I'm getting ready.
Getting ready for the judgment day.
Can't wait to see
Getting ready
him.
for the judgment
I
day.
can't wait to
Getting
see
ready
him.
for the judgment day.
Getting ready.
Getting ready for the judgment day.
My Lord.
My Lord. My Lord.
Lord.
The Speak Truth to Power Award is presented to people who exemplify the qualities that defined my father's fearless approach to journalism. Above all, Cheryl Wills is a fearless, focused, internally directed, hardcore journalist. Make no mistake, don't let that beautiful face fool you. When it is called for, Cheryl Wills knows how and when to deliver a swift and powerful journalistic blow. You know, they say the pen is mightier than the sword. It is our great honor and pleasure to present you with the Speak Truth to Power Award.
Well, thank you. I'm also so thankful that, I had the flu last 2 days ago. So that's why I was sort of subdued, praying, God, please don't let me sneeze up here. Please don't let my nose run up here. So it held off, so I'm really grateful for that. But I am very honored to receive an award in honor of Mr. Andrew Cooper and his wonderful wife, who is still holding the torch, and his daughter. You know a person's legacy by the people they leave behind. And he couldn't have better examples than his wife and daughter. Do you want me to open it up for questions? Okay, because does anyone have any questions about anything? I was one of the original employees at New York 1 in '92, and prior to that I worked at Channel 5 in New York. I did 3 years there as a production assistant. Being a journalist, and I also write for the Huffington Post, and I love, Rich is a great news writer too. We used to enjoy writing together at New York 1, and you know, when I found this out, I wrote it so quickly because I wrote it inside of a year, to answer your question. I just found out about Sandy and Emma last year, and it'll be in bookstores in January. You know, it's like when you want to know something so badly and you get the answer, writing it is not a chore. It's an honor, it's a privilege, it's a pleasure. You know what I mean? Like you guys, when you do your homework, it's like, oh God, and you delay and you procrastinate and all that. I wrote this book everywhere. At work, at New York 1, I wrote it in the middle of the night. I drove everyone crazy because I was just so inspired. You know, imagine finding out why your last name is the way it is. Imagine that. Imagine how I felt when I saw Edmund Wills bought my grandfather in 1850. That was just beyond the pale of just, you know, and what's also interesting is that we all know about slavery, right? We all know about the Civil War, but it seems like it was so far away, you know what I mean? That it almost seems mythical. And when I learned the story of my family, then it became completely alive. You know, so inside of a year, because I was so inspired. Yeah, for my entire life I thought it was impossible because slaves were treated as property. They were not citizens of the United States. So when they came into the world and they left, there was not a trace. They didn't keep records. They didn't keep birth certificates. They didn't, you know what I mean? So that's why there's an iron curtain, as I told Annie on the phone. There's an iron curtain between, for a lot of descendants of slaves, it's almost impossible for you to know. So when I saw this bit of history, and the only reason I know is because Sandy fought in the Civil War and my grandma Emma had to file depositions to get her pension. If they had done that, they would have died anonymously just like everyone else. So I was surprised, and when I learned it, sister, I got to writing right away because I know a story when I see it. You know what I mean? I haven't been in the business 20 years to have something come across my desk and not know what it is. So I knew right away. I said, this is a book. This is a book. So, yes, ma'am.
My name is Julie, and I was wondering, when you found out all these news, were you overwhelmed? Did you feel like it wasn't you, like your father or like the people that you might have known?
Yeah, I was overwhelmed. There isn't a word created to explain what I felt when I went through those hundreds of pages of depositions. And you know what got me the most? That my father died and didn't know. My grandfather died and didn't know. My they all died not knowing. That's what got me in the gut. You know what I mean? Because when you learn a history like this, you have the wind at your back. You understand? I wrote this not for myself, but I wrote it for all Americans, because all Americans of all races made tremendous sacrifices. I don't care if you're Italian, Jewish, Polish. If your family came here, I don't care what year it was, someone went through hell for you to sit in comfort in a college setting like you are right now. And when you realize the struggle, you've got to be grateful. At the very least, hello, right? You can't take, you're in a college setting. I mean, 100 years ago, the women in this room would have been expected to have children, be obedient to their husbands, and nothing else. Nothing else. And that's white women, black women, whoever you are. Nothing else. The treasures of this world were for white males. And I'm not turning this into a racial thing at all, but I'm just stating a fact. So women had to fight to get all the women in here. You know, you should realize that people fought for you to be able to go to college. Don't take what you have, this great institution, for granted. And that goes for many ethnic groups as well. Italians came into this country and were discriminated against horribly. Jews came into this country and were discriminated against, and their people fought for them. So when you have specifics about who fought for you and why, well, you've got to have a new pep in your step. Wouldn't you say, President Dugan? You've got to have a new pep in your step when you find out what people have done to make your life easier. So I have a major pep in my step. I'm a very happy girl now.
I'm having deja vu moments because I actually knew my great-grandparents who were slaves.
Wow.
And I only wish that I had conversations with them. I know a little bit about their lives, but I just honor what you've tried to bring to us in terms of an understanding of a people who have had such a unique experience, and I thank you so much.
It's really my pleasure. And I wrote it really to give voice for all of the descendants, because don't we all wish we could talk to them? And you know, it's so ironic, when my grandma was filing those depositions and they were writing down what this illiterate woman said, she was talking to me. Can you imagine? 150 years it lay dormant in the National Archives, and her granddaughter 150 years later found it. So that's the beauty of America, wouldn't you say, folks? Yeah. That's the beauty of living in this country. You never know what little golden nugget is waiting for you. And once you unearth it, it can change your life. How did I know I was ready to be a journalist? I wanted to be a journalist from when I was a young girl. I used to interview all of my relatives, Mrs. Cooper. I had a grandfather on my mom's side. He fought in the World War I. And I was 9 years old. I took a little tape recorder. I had my own little Gazette in the summertime. You know, I didn't grow up with cable and video games like you guys. I actually had to think when I was a kid. You know, I didn't have that kind of entertainment. So we had to do our own stuff. And I created a Gazette, you know, and I would interview my relatives. I just thought they were fascinating. So that's how I knew when I was a little kid, you know. I knew right then that the process of asking questions and creating a whole dialogue and writing it down, that's journalism. And, you know, it was my father, you know, he said, well, what do you want to do? And I showed him everything that I had. He said, oh, so you want to be a journalist? I was like, oh, is that what it's called? I had no idea that it actually had a name, you know, because I was a kid. But so I knew from a very young age. And I would suggest to all the high school kids in here, anyone who is confused and you're like, oh, I don't know what I want to do, put down the video games, stop with all that, and find out what it is that you naturally like to do. You know, the things you do when nobody asks you to do it. And that is probably an indication of what you are going to make your career, or what you can make your career.
I was very inspired this afternoon.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I was a colleague of Andy Cooper.
Oh, wow.
And I moved to Florida. And one of the things that came out to me today was that there's a mentoring system in the colleges and such.
Yes.
Because I was enrolled in college at Brooklyn College, and I dropped out within a year.
Okay.
I did go back way, way later and graduated, but I mentor in Florida now.
Okay.
And I feel like I saved the girl that I met when she was in the 5th grade, and I mentored her through the 8th grade.
Okay.
And I know how important that is.
When you found out all this information, which you know, I'm sure was very surprising to you.
Yeah.
Did you take it as a personal aspect, or did you take it as a journalist? You know, did you, because it is, you know, part of your family, it is part of your legacy. Did you realize this as a journalist, or did you, you know, start researching this as, you know, just your personal favor, kind of like asking around with your family or something? You know, you see what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely. That's an excellent question, and the answer is both. I approached it from a personal standpoint, and I approached it from a journalistic standpoint. They were both, they're both in me, right? My job, my career, and my personal family history. So I approached it from a dual perspective. And that's probably why I was able to write it so quickly, because I had the skill to research, and then I used that with my passion to know who exactly I was. So I used both. And yes, ma'am.
My question was, how does your family feel about you uncovering your family's history, your legacy? Because it was a surprise to you to find out all of this stuff about the people who fought for your freedom, not only yours, but your family's.
Right.
So how do they feel about that?
Oh, they are just blown away. They are speechless, really. I mean, everyone was in a state of shock and didn't believe it at first until I actually, I handed out would you believe it if I didn't hand it all out to you? I mean, you'd be like, oh, she claims that her grandfather fought in the Civil War. I mean, so I have to hand these things out so people know that it's real, but everyone is elated. Everyone has even my brother Clarence has a much greater sense of legacy and pride in being an American and all of the sacrifices that have been made. So it has been all good, and it really fills you up. That's why my brother, I take him with me to speak everywhere I go, and no one's shy. Everyone's happy to get on stage and talk about it because it's truly extraordinary. So we are all thrilled. Oh, well, I guess so. When you're the oldest, you're the leader, right? Any oldest children in here? Hey. So, when you're the oldest, you're the leader anyway. So, but thank you. I have time for one more question. All the way in the back, sir.
For someone who has broadcast journalism aspirations, what advice would you give? What advice would you give to that person?
I would say go for the gold, because journalism is an honorable profession. It is also very competitive, and realize that you're going to have some people along the way who are going to tell you, you don't look like this, you don't sound like that. Let me tell you, nobody comes out of high school looking or sounding like an anchor, okay? Nobody. So it's something you develop. It's something that you create as you go along. You become more mature. You become more sophisticated. And don't give up if someone says you don't have the look. What is the look? There's people of all shapes and sizes and heights and everything on TV news. And you could be one of them too, That's one of the things. I have a lot of friends who will say, I majored in broadcast journalism, but I had a teacher that told me that I just would never make it because of the way I either spoke or looked. And I would always say, what a shame that you believed that lie. You know what I mean? So my advice is to go forward, write. Young journalists in training, the foundation is writing. Don't be so quick to get in front of the camera and look pretty. That's the easy part. The hard part is writing. Understand how to structure a sentence, how to find the story, how to develop a lead, how to develop your sources, and how to research. That's the nut and bolts of journalism. And if you ain't got that, you ain't gonna go far, okay? The pretty part is a dime a dozen, okay? But focus on the foundation, and you guys will be all right. Okay? Thank you all for your attention.